I want you to feel it too. So just listen to me, baby. Can't stop me now. Hear what I say. My feet want to move, so get out of the way. I'm gonna have my say. I'm gonna do every good today. I'm gonna dance, dance, dance. Ooh, gonna make that dance, dance, shake, shame on you if you can't dance too. I'm not shame, 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 shame on you if you can't dance too. Don't stop the motion if you get the notion. You can't stop the groove, cause you just won't. Got my sunroof down, got my diamond in the back. Put on the second wheel, won't matter if you know
Rocken Locken here. What's your opinion show? Hey, I just thought I would do a quick talk. Well, kind of a quick talk on the Electoral College, how it works. I thought I knew exactly how it worked until I just did about an hour and a half of research on it and realized what a clusterfuck that it was at the beginning. Basically, I'm going to keep a simple version of it, and I'm going to put some links in the description afterwards so people can read through the bullshit of how it started and, you know, and all that good shit and everything like that. And I appreciate everybody listening in the chat room if they are. I've got that up too. I'll try to see as many as I can, but it's kind of hard when I'm doing this alone. But like I said, it's Rocken Locken in with myself on Kenny Jackson and my What's Your Opinion show. Kenny also runs the Opinion to Facts channel. I also run 2 channels of my own, the Palladian Light Grid Project and Palladian Express Productions. Why don't you go to YouTube or go to Facebook and go to Twitter and like the What's Your Opinion show channel, or I mean page, excuse me, like the What's Your Opinion show page on both Twitter and both Facebook. I'm getting a little tongue-tied here, so let me get into what I know about the Electoral College. Okay, first of all, this is where we stand right now on the Electoral College. There is about, I would say, let me do the math. What I'm trying to do right now is I'm trying to find, okay, there it is. The Electoral College has 5, well, I knew this already, but I was looking for something else. The Electoral College right now has a total of 538 votes. Okay, and I will post as a thumbnail to this video, I will post which states have how many electoral votes. And of course, it goes by congressional districts and it goes by population. I mean, for instance, New York, of course, is going to have, New York's got 29. California's got the most with 55. Florida has 29 as well. Texas 38. But then you get into some states like Alaska where there's 3. Hawaii 4. The state that I live in, Oregon, has 7. Montana's got 3. So all these states have a different number, and it's changed over the years depending on the population. I think Florida only had 27 in 2020. But here's the problem with the Electoral College, okay? In the last, like I said, 4 or 5 presidencies, I've said this on other shows, 2 people that have won the popular vote have actually, and this doesn't matter whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, an independent. If you gave a fuck about what's right, you'd be outraged about this, okay? In 2000, of course, Al Gore won the popular vote by 500,000 people. Okay? 2016, Hillary Clinton wins the popular vote by 3.5 million people. Mostly coming out of California, but still, I mean, every other country, modern country, that claims to be fair has a general election, and the technology has been there for us to do. They've tried to use excuses like they used the Electoral College years ago because technology wasn't there. And the technology wasn't there to count all of it. It would take literally like months to a year to count all the votes, right? So what ended up happening was they kept the thing. But here's the deal. We have had the technology to do a recount, to do a single recount overnight through computers since 1948, since the Dewey-Truman election, when they thought Dewey had won, but they did the recount overnight and Truman won. So we have now doing it by hand. Now a third request for a recount, like which was done in 2000, when Al Gore actually ended up winning the election by 150 votes in Florida, but he got screwed out of that because the Supreme Court stopped it on a Saturday, which they never meet on the weekend. And I went into that on previous shows. But the Electoral College was started kind of like as a, something simple to do. So for instance, for every congressman, there's 435 congressmen in the United States. And now that varies, and I'm not going to break that down throughout the states. But one thing each state does share is they do have 2 senators, which I have a problem with because some state like Montana or North Dakota has 2 senators. Guess what? California, Texas, Florida, New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, North Carolina, they only have 2 senators as well. So what you have is for every 2 senators in each state, you have 2 electorates. There's 4. And then for every congressional district in each state, you have an electorate. These people are chosen. They're normal citizens, supposedly anonymous citizens, chosen by the state legislature, okay? And these people, their purpose is to vote with the Electoral College come a couple months after the general election. See, we have the general election in each state now, of course. Whoever wins that state, those electorates in that state are pledged to honor that and vote there, even if they're Republican, they're obligated to vote for the Democrat. Okay. We've had a couple electorates switch, but it's never affected an election in modern times. Now, the time that it could affect one is if, say, we got down to a couple of votes, like it was 270 to 268, or if it was 269, you could have an electorate change their vote before it even went to the House and Senate for a vote, because that's who would break the tie. If we ended up with 269 to 269 at the end of the night, a tie, and I had it, our last election, I had a million possibilities drawn up for what could happen, and that would have been one of them. But the problem is Donald Trump still would have been elected because what would have happened was you would have had the Congress at the time, which still is controlled by the Republicans. They would have voted the Congress votes, which is the House and the Senate, 435 congressmen, 50 senators, and 3 delegates from the District of Columbia would vote on the president if it was tied at 269. Now, of course, before we got to that point, like I said, one of these anonymous electorates from a state could go against the state's vote, and they could vote their own way, and then that could sway the presidency the other way. Now, this is not something I'm going to get too much into because this would give me a headache I'll research this one day, but I do know this for a fact. Every state has a different law on what these electorates are supposed to do. Some, it's completely obligated and kind of a no-go. In some states, it's kind of, well, it's not really, they don't really have to do that. Because somebody in Texas was threatening, I know, that if the election was close in the Electoral College, like if it was close between Hillary and Bill at the end, or between Hillary and Trump at the end of the night, that they would vote for Hillary. And this person changed their mind after getting several death threats. And of course, you know, they made a dumbass of themselves by going out in public and saying who they were. I mean, instead of doing it anonymously, but it wouldn't, you know, it didn't need to come down to that for this particular election. So it you know, it didn't matter. But these electorates are kind of, they're kind of semi-anonymous. They pick people, so they just like randomly pick people voting. It kind of reminds me of the way the Nielsen TV ratings used to work. They would pay a little bit of money for about 5 to 10,000 family members, or 5,000 families in the U.S. to have a box installed on their TV, and it would basically track everything that they watched and shit, and then they would use that as what the rest of the nation was watching and whatnot. You know, now it's more reliant on advertisers, and I don't know if anybody's ever gotten, I've gotten like $5 in the mail before, and a letter to, and a questionnaire to fill out for Nielsen on what I watch and things of that nature. I think I kept the $5 and didn't send it back in, or maybe I did. I don't know. But this is how ridiculous this system is. Okay, each state has a certain number of electors. There's two variances though. For instance, Maine, the state of Maine has actually 4 electoral votes, but three of them are only guaranteed. One of them is in a special district, so a candidate could technically win 4, and another candidate, or 3, and another candidate could technically win 1 there. Nebraska, same way. Nebraska's got a district that there's 5 votes up for grabs in Nebraska. 4 of them are a guarantee. If you win the state of Nebraska, you're guaranteed the 4. There's a district in Omaha that's also independent and up for grabs. And if a Democrat were to, and it's kind of a heavily liberal area for Nebraska, you know, for a state like Nebraska. But you know, I believe that somebody like Bernie, I thought Hillary might take that district, but I think somebody like Bernie would win that 1 electoral vote. And when you talk about a close election like it's going to be, you know, unless the Russians are allowed to do another screw job on us, when you talk about the close election that it's going to be, every electoral vote counts. It could come down to that extra vote in Nebraska. It could come down to that extra vote in Maine. You know, it could come down to late into the night into Hawaii and Alaska. There's 4 in Hawaii, 3 in Alaska, electoral votes. You know, in 2000, Tennessee, if Al Gore would have only won his home state, we wouldn't even have been discussing Florida. So, you know, that's how it can go. But the Electoral College, at one point, sometime in the 1800s, or in the 1800s, there was a push to make it more of a, to kind of slowly phase out the Electoral College, but black slave owners, landowners in the South, like land barons in the South, like Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina, Tennessee, Louisiana, Arkansas. I mean, you know, I could go on and on and on. Parts of Texas, Oklahoma, definitely. They didn't like that. And the upper Midwest states as well. They didn't like that because that felt like that would eventually give black people the right to vote, and they would lose all their power. And so that's the problem. And the problem is, to change this, to get rid of this Electoral College, just like with impeachment, it has to go through the House first. It has to then go to the Senate. And in the Senate, lo and behold, just like with impeachment, you need 67 votes, 2/3 He needs a 2/3 majority to make a constitutional change on getting rid of the Electoral College. Okay, and the Republicans used to bitch that it's been slanted for Democrats, the electoral map, which has not been the case. The last two elections, or the last election and the 2000 election, where the Democrat had more popular votes, they got screwed in the Electoral College. And I really do believe Hillary did too. I really believe where the Russians really got Hillary were Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, historic Democrat states. And she only lost by a very little. And I just had this funny feeling right before the election ended when Trump was going to go back up to Michigan. He said, I guess I need to go back up to Michigan again and hold another rally. I had this funny hunch. And it's funny that it was like 50,000 votes between those three states. And you're talking three states with a total of, let's see, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Detroit, East Lansing, Milwaukee. I mean, you're talking, God, I mean, when you add all that up, you're talking, I don't know, tens and tens of millions, maybe even close to 100 million people when you add those three states up. Okay? And so what I think happened was in these rural areas, people voted. Some people, yes, did vote twice. In fact, one lady was caught voting twice for Trump in Wisconsin. But I think somehow they got into our software a little bit and manipulated a few votes. I think they tried it in Florida. I think they did it a little bit in North Carolina. But I'm thinking North Carolina was more what you would call voter suppression, right? Making sure that fucking, if you're a minority, especially an African American, you have an ID on you, you know, and all that, and making you wait if you're from a minority neighborhood, making sure that you wait in a 9-hour line. See, out here in Oregon, we do mail-in voting, okay? And that's the best way to do it, okay? You mail your vote in, or you drop it off on the day of the election, or the day whatever. You can mail it in a week early, whatever the fuck. You don't wait in these long lines. It eliminates that. It gets more people to vote. It eliminates the corruption a little bit. It eliminates possible hostilities and possible violence that can happen at these polls. And it makes everything fair. It makes everything fair. We had another election, 2000, like I said, 2004. Here's another example. Yes, Bush barely won the popular vote over Kerry, but Ohio would have swung the election to Kerry, and it was close. It was getting late into the night. You still had minority neighborhoods, black neighborhoods that were heavily Democratic with people that were waiting in 9-hour long lines, and they just closed it down. So there were so many people that didn't get to vote that it's possible that election could have been swung to Kerry. So you have 3 elections out of the last 5 that were very suspect, okay? Very suspicious and very suspect. And lo and behold, each of them Republicans won, okay? Because they control, you know, some of these, a lot of these congressional districts in a lot of these southern states they control. So that gives them, you know, that gives them the power, that gives them the electorate, and that gives them 2 senators. So like, you know, 2 senators from bumfuck North Dakota or bumfuck Montana have they dictate as much of the law that California has to deal with, New York has to deal with, Florida has to deal with as these own states do. Okay, and in 2020, when the census comes up again, they're going to redistrict some of these states. So it's going to depend on who's in power after the 2000 census. Then probably in early 2000, late 2000, the Congress will decide where, you know, how we need to change these maps, and maybe some electoral votes will be taken away or given to some states depending. But as of right now, this is how it stands. But that wouldn't affect till 2024. So the 2016 electoral vote map as far as the numbers for each state go, how many votes they have, that'll be the same in 2020. After the gerrymandering laws change, or redistrict, I mean, congressional, I'm sorry, I was in the hospital last couple of days, people. I'm not feeling that good, but I just want to try to explain what I know about the Electoral College. Okay, I just know that we don't do a popular vote. Why we don't? It was because of fucking greedy slave owners in the beginning, and we've just never had the will to completely get rid of it, which we should get rid of it. But the problem again, we're facing 67 senators. Listen, the Republicans have control right now, 51 to 49. That could flip after the election. But what you're never going to get for another generation or two is you're never going to get a Senate that is 67 members Republican or 67 members Democrat, for that matter. You're not going to get that for a couple of decades. Okay, it's just not going to go like that. I don't know when the last time it was probably that imbalanced. We didn't have 50 states or that many senators. So Puerto Rico should be a state, actually. There you go. There would be two more liberal senators, I'm sure. I'm sure of it, but they don't want that because the state doesn't look like Scandinavia. It looks like, it looks like Brazil or Mexico. So they want to keep it as a territory that they don't have to really fuck with. You know what I mean? If we'd have played our cards right, Cuba could have been a 52nd state, but we had to get in their business, and their bullshit and the 50s, and look what's become of it. And most of that is our fault by meddling, just like with not helping Puerto Rico out. They're our territory. And as a Puerto Rican, you have the right to vote for president. But here's the funny thing. You can't vote for president in Puerto Rico. If you can get to the U.S. mainland with your Puerto Rico ID and all that shit, and after they give you a big ass hassle, which I'm sure you get, then you can vote for president. Isn't that's a real genius thing to do. That's a real sensible thing, which has to tell you that there's a racial motive behind it. It's just like with voter suppression. But back to this Electoral College, it's as ridiculous as it sounds. I'll put a link, like I said, in the description box on how to understand it a little bit better. But different states have different amount of votes, and like I said, that could change again in 2024, depending on how the 2020 census goes. But as it stands now, it's going to be the same in 2020. New York will still have 29, Florida 29, California the most at 55. You'll have 38 in Texas. The least amount is in, like Alaska's got 3, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, they got 3. Keep in mind, Nebraska's got 5, but they've got that one that's open, and same with Maine. They've got 4, but 1 that's open. And I don't know why they don't just, if we're going to do it, like we're going to do it. I don't know why they just don't change that and make it part of the whole state. But I'm in favor of getting rid of this Electoral College, and I think there needs to be a big push to get rid of it, because it should be the popular vote. This is ridiculous. This is almost as stupid as, instead of having a valedictorian award for a class at a high school, take everybody from that class, just everybody, no matter their grades, everybody from that class, write their name on a piece of paper, put it in a hat, stir up the hat, draw a name out of that hat, and whoever the fuck it was, no matter what, even if their grade point average was 1.0, make them the valedictorian. That is about as intelligent as the Electoral College. But that's what happens. And I want to reiterate again, there's 538 votes. It takes 270. Once you hit that 270 threshold, boom, you're president. Okay? And then the electoral still got to vote and all that shit. If it's ever tied at 269 and one of the electorates don't split off, which there's a lot of pressure nowadays. I don't know that one would. But if one didn't and it stayed at 269, you'd have the leave 100 members of the Senate and the 435 members of Congress, the whole House. It would go to them, and they would vote. They would vote on the shit as far as who is going to become the next president of the United States. But if we had a popular vote, it wouldn't matter. I could never see a tie in it where it'd go to an automatic. See, it'd go to an automatic recount anyway. If the state's real close, it goes to an automatic recount. And then a third one can even be paid for. But, you know, I mean, if there's ever a fucking popular vote and there's a tie in it, I'll personally walk to anybody's house. Okay. I mean, so, you know, and that's after the recount. So a popular vote is definitely where we need to go. The Electoral College is ridiculous. It should piss people off. This should piss people off. Second issue that should piss people off, I've talked about before, is this fucking, these judges that are added for life. Fuck, you know what? Fuck term limits for senators and congressmen. That's just a dog whistle by Trump. You don't want that. Fuck that. You know, and fuck that anyway. Some of these people are good, actually good people that have been in there 100 years. Yeah, some have been in too long, like Schumer and Pelosi, but fuck that. Let's get term limits going for these Supreme Court judges first. Like, let's give them 20 years. Okay, that's plenty. I mean, that's too much for me, but let's give them 20 years and see how that works. Because the way it works now, these people are on there till they're on a respirator and they have to be hauled in. It's even if they're getting Alzheimer's, it would take the rest of the Supreme Court justices to vote to get them off, and you know the ones on their side are not going to do it. So that's something we have zero control over. You know, our founding fathers had no idea to put that in there. They had no idea to put in more presidential ways to rein in the president. I think they were kind of still thinking, even though they were getting away from a monarchy and a kingship in England, I think that they still thought that maybe it's okay, baby, you got food over there. I was talking to my cat. I think they were still thinking that monarchy kind of a thought of the kind of, you know, giving the president that royalty that they wanted to be very careful on what they could and could not do to them. Okay. And as far as the Supreme Court goes, they never addressed the Supreme Court as the only way they addressed it is that it would take the other members of the Supreme Court to kick a member off the Supreme Court. There's nobody else that has any kind of authority or checks and balances whatsoever over these old crows, okay? And it's always a 5-4 decision down party lines, always, no matter what the issue, except abortion. But that guy that was the swing vote for abortion, that Republican is retired, okay? And they're trying to push in this new guy, this Kavanaugh, and he is very anti-abortion. Okay, they will overturn Roe v. Wade, totally. It's just a matter of getting past the election and seeing if they can get Trump maybe reelected. But if Trump is reelected, they will overturn Roe v. Wade for sure. I know Trump's stupid, but he might have them try to hold off until then. But if they don't, if he can push this through, then it can throw definitely a monkey wrench also in the FBI's investigation into fucking Trump, because eventually it's going to go to the Supreme Court. You'll have every court underneath that'll probably say yes, a sitting president can be indicted, a sitting president can be indicted. It's going to go to the Supreme Court. If we could manage to hold off and not confirm this idiot, okay, and leave it a 4-4 tie. Fuck it. If I was the Democrats, I'd pull what the Republicans did. I would refuse any Trump nomination. I got that. I would have, if we took over the Senate, I would refuse any Trump nomination, period. And that way I'd keep it at a 4-4 gridlock. And that way the lower court be able to be under it. Let the lower court make the decision. Okay, because it did go to the U.S. District Court, which is still fairly liberal right now. So if all this is giving you a headache, it's giving me one too, man. I mean, my God. So, like I said, I'll put a link in there that explains it if you're interested in some reading sometime on how this whole shit worked, where it came from. Other countries have used the Electoral College too, but they don't anymore. I don't know, some country did in the 1800s, might have been the Germans, might have not been. And then in 159, it looks like, or 1059, some places used it. But there was both good and bad intentions when this first began. Most of it was bad. Some of the good thinking was, well, you know, each state can count their own votes, but that would take for us to verify that would take months, possibly years. So what we'll do is we'll just have these electorates that represent, we'll have the same amount of Congress or House members. We'll say have the same amount of electorates as House members in each state. Then we'll have 2 electorates for each senator in each state, and then 3 electorates for DC. And what we'll do is we'll go to that as our voting. That will be our voting for each state. Okay, so, and these electorates are fairly private people, unless they're not bound to not make themselves public. Some do. Some will come out and say stuff, like especially during this last election, but most stay private. Most stay private, and they do have to, when they do vote, their name will come out and be leaked when they do vote if they did win, like oh shit, like let's say it was getting late into the night. Let's say it was getting late into the night, and it was like 269, 267, or okay. So it'd be like if it was 268 Trump, 267 Hillary, or excuse me, if it was 269 Hillary and 268 Trump or 267 Trump, right? So all they would need was Alaska, which is a very Republican, turning more Democrat state. But let's say that one of the electorates up there changed their mind and voted for Hillary and gave her 270 and put Trump only at 268. Okay, so it would have been 266, 269. All Trump would have needed was those 3 to tie her, and he would have been president because we had a Republican Congress that would have voted him in. But if one of those electorates would have broke rank, which one was talking about from Alaska, then that might have swung it. But those 3 states that the Russians hacked, that just killed everything. You know what I mean? And then you get third parties. It's not that I'm against the third party, but they're very lazy, the Libertarians and Green Party, because they don't really have a grassroots movement, and their leaders are completely inept. The leader of the Green Party is a Russian shill, Jill Stein, who just likes to get involved every 3 years to fuck shit up for the Democrats, and she really is lazy. And then the other guy is a complete moron for the Libertarian Party, Gary Johnson. You know, they have one good issue I like. Libertarians, they are for legalizing drugs, but other than that, they really are just kind of disruptors like the Green Party is. You know, what we need is a grassroots, independent, progressive type of party, but we need to also understand it's going to have to start from the ground up, and we're not going to win the 2020 election. We're not even going to get all crazy and get all wild and get together and win the 2024 election. 2028, doubt it. 2032, maybe. But it's going to take a grassroots movement of 4 to 5 elections. And I talked with Callie privately even about this, that, yeah, man, I mean, that's cool and everything, but You know, you need to understand. And he did, and he was like, "Yeah, it's going to take a few. It ain't going to be next time or the time after the time after. It's going to take a few cycles to do this." And keep in mind, you know, sometime in the next, oh, I wouldn't. Some people say one, but maybe one. I'd say sometime between the next 2 or 3 to 4. The next 2 to 4, sometime between 24 and 32. The years 24 and 32, Texas could turn blue. That would solve all of our electoral problems as long as the Russians didn't fuck around. Texas going blue would be a death nail for the Republican Party. But all these judges and Supreme Court judges that they've got in there now, God knows what kind of crazy power they could use. But, you know, when you start talking about voting third party, vote independent progressive. There's a lot of independent progressives that are running and winning in some of these states. You know, Bernie Sanders type candidates that are winning in some of these states. And they're winning the primaries, I mean, against, you know, Democrats that have been in there 150 years. What we need to do, we need to get through this election, get through this midterm, okay, get through all this bullshit, and then the next time Nancy Pelosi seat is up, well, actually it's this fall. She's already won her primary. She's in there, but in 2 years maybe we need to challenge her. Now Chuck Schumer's in the Senate. The thing about the Senate, senators only run it once every 6 years. Okay, presidents every 4. They can only be president 8 years, but senators can run once every 6 years. Okay, and as far as, like I said, House members go, like Nancy Pelosi, I want to call it the Congress because I usually think, when I think of Congress, I think of the House, but really it's the Senate and the House. But Pelosi's in the House, the minority leader in the House, and probably will be majority leader hopefully come April. Come January. I say hopefully because it's better than Paul Ryan or whoever they want to replace him with. But you know, Pelosi and Schumer have got to go. They're an embarrassment to our party. They're old. It's really time for them to go ahead and serve one more term and then get the hell out of there. And let's get some people in there. But it takes a while, people. I've been at this since I was 5 years old. Okay, in 1980 when Reagan beat Carter, and I still dispute that election. All right, I've lived through it all. For anybody that's just now getting into politics, cry me a river about how long it's taken Mueller. Cry me a river about how shit's going. I've been watching this shit since fucking most people didn't have a remote control TV in their house and you couldn't play Pac-Man even at home yet. So be patient. You know, the Miller investigation has only killed me. Trey Gowdy, he's such a prick Republican up on the Hill. He's out of there, of course, this year. He's not running for re-election because all he knows, sort of the whole shit house is coming down with the Republican Party. But he's the guy for 2.5 years that was up Hillary Clinton's ass and had her up on the Hill, you know, twice for 12 hours to speak. And that went too long. That didn't go on too long. That was fine. But the Mueller investigation, barely a year into it, a year and like a little over 400 days into it, and he's bitching. And like I said again, Watergate, 1,500 days, Whitewater, 2,500 days, Iran-Contra, close to 3,000 days. I mean, and on and on and on. And these were less complicated, fucking investigations, people. I know we got more technology now. Well, we really don't. We've got the same amount of agents that would work on it now as then. We really don't have more technology per se there's more technology to do with the people that they're investigating did, but there's not really a whole hell of a lot more technology to track these people and track this shit down. So it's going to take a while. An investigation takes a while. I mean, I expect this one to take another 2 years. I mean, I expect it to go into, I expect it, because not the investigation, I expect about another year. But then you're going to have about another year of, it's got to go through the Congress. It's got to be voted through Congress for him to be impeached, and that can be done by one vote, even just one vote. Then it's got to go over to the Senate for a trial to whether to get him out of there or not. And that's going to take 67 votes. Okay? And if that happened, he's just kicked out of the White House. Then he's not a sitting president anymore. So there'd be no question like of can you indict or convict a sitting president, because Miller could go after him, or or maybe he wouldn't. But I just know this in my heart, and I really do feel like it's going to be Trump's trying to get that other person in there so we never see this shit. But Miller's about a year ahead, and I'm sure he's got Trump's tax returns that he wouldn't show. I'm sure that whether it's him or his daddy, who died in the late 90s, who bailed him out so many times, I'm sure that the Trumps have had connections with the Russians probably, I'd say for probably at least 50 years. That's just my guess and opinion, that they've had some kind of connection with them. It could be as deep as Trump was groomed to be an agent. There are a lot of people that are and have been for years, and yet they're never used, never needed, but if they're ever needed, they're needed. It's, I've studied the Cold War. I've studied the Russian military, the Soviet military. I've studied how they used to do things before computers, how they used to try to fuck with us over shortwave radio, jam signals of ours, especially here on the West Coast, jam some of our radio signals, pick up creepy shortwave. I remember picking up creepy shortwave Russian radio. Like I said, one guy that was one guy that sounded English completely. Then the guy didn't know what was going on and never used any fucking American slang or nothing. Shit even your grandma would say once in a while. This guy, I'm like, what in the fuck? And then this one guy I talked to in the 70s, his dad was stationed about 10 miles outside of East Berlin when the wall was up. He was in West Germany. And he would pick up these American-sounded voices on the radio that would tell them to not watch, don't bother watching your favorite sports team this weekend, whether it was NFL, NBA, whatever, because they all went bankrupt. Yeah, right, okay. But there was no internet back then and news. And it cost a lot to call home. Fuck, you hear that on the radio by an English person by a campfire in your barracks that your home, that it's been, the NFL's been canceled. Some gullible person, even in the 70s, might have believed it. So, I know their MO, and this is just, and Putin is different than the rest of the leaders that they've ever had. They've all been killers and murderers and shit, but Putin is not just some fat cat who's drank a bunch of vodka. He's a stone cold in the field killer. Look into his eyes. He's a stone cold killer, and he don't like being questioned by the media. He don't like being, if the question doesn't suit him, the rare times somebody gets to, like the other day, he don't like it. He gives him the cold look of death. There's a picture I posted before where the last time him and Obama met, it was Obama was standing there and Putin was passing him, and Obama, I've never seen Obama have a fucking more of a, come on, of a you want to fight look in his eyes. And he's about 1.5 feet taller than Putin. And I know Putin's a KGB agent and karate and all that shit, but Obama's athletic, younger. My money'd be on Obama whipping his ass, but that's a whole nother story. But it was like the look out of Obama's eyes to him was, want some, come get some, little man. And Putin had to tilt his head real high with his stone cold killer blue eyes and look at him with those stone cold blue eyes of his, those blue-eyed devil eyes. You can see blue eyes sometimes and they're very beautiful, but a lot of the times when you see them, they sure look like they're coming from a stone cold killer devil caucasoid. And I'm a white person with brown eyes. which is strange. I know. Well, I've only got about 4% Indian in me, and the rest is pure Scandinavian. So I should have blue eyes, but I don't. But yeah, that's about it. The Electoral College is fucked up. It's as ridiculous. Anybody that doesn't know anything about it, that hears it and thinks it sounds ridiculous, your hunch is right. It's that ridiculous, and it's even more ridiculous than you're thinking it is. And it's like bullshit. You're gonna be like, what? What the fuck? And you got to read all the way through it, and you realize that it has a lot to do with greed, control, monarchy, slave ownership, things of that nature. You know what I mean? If anything, maybe we should have just gone to it like Canada and England, have a parliamentary government. Get rid of those stupid, like finally Canada did those stupid wigs though, wearing those during it. That was ridiculous. Wearing those stupid wigs England does during it. And you had more of a parliamentary type government where you have like 3 or 4 different parties that have some say. Okay, but they're not disruptor parties like the Libertarian or Green Party typically would be in this country. Okay, there's, they have a little bit of say in what they do. And like South Africa, I think, has 3 different basic strong parties in their parliament. But we have a Congress and a Senate, and then just a legislative branch, 3 legislative branches, one with no oversight, which is the Supreme Court, and the others seem to not want to do much of an oversight at all. But that being said, what I'm going to do is I'll put a link. In fact, I'm going to copy it right now. I'm going to put a link into how the United States, this is from Wikipedia, how the United States was came up with this fucking Electoral College and the changes that were made in it over the years, and pursuant to this amendment and this year and this bullshit, here has, whereas, thereby, herefore, and all that old bullshit. You know what I mean? But peeps, I don't know. It's just crazy. I hope I haven't wasted your time. Like I said, I would have been better, but I don't feel very good right now. I'm still like, I've had 2 heart attacks in 4 days, small ones. And my stomach is killing me right now, but I wanted to do this just to put it out there. Not because I like to hear myself talk. I really don't. I listened back once to my shows just to see how they sounded, but like everybody else, I think everybody's like that. They don't like hearing their own voice, you know what I mean? Some people do. I had a friend actually who did. It was funny. I knew a guy who did like to hear his own voice back. But that's cool. That's confident. Yeah, he was a cool dude. That was just his thing, though. He loved his own voice. But I guess I sound 50 apparently, according to somebody. I sound 50. But I'm only 40. I'll be 43 August 1st. So, I've been around the block. I've been awakened since I was probably 3. I remember things vividly since I was 2. I remember being into politics since I was about, probably a couple months short of 5 years old. Reagan and Carter. I remember it clearly. I watched that kind of shit instead of cartoons. I watched MTV, ESPN, and that's it, and that's it. We only had 10 channels, and that was on cable here until the early 90s. Okay. So, and then when we got BET, it killed my family because that's all I would have the TV on is BET. In a white household, I had grandparents to come over, and I wouldn't turn it. I'd keep it up. I was so excited to get BET because I saw it on the satellite at my aunt's a few years ago. But yeah, I had, Anyway, with that being said, I want to just thank again Kenny Jackson for giving me the opportunity to be on here, and I really appreciate him, and I can't wait for our next show. Opinion, you want to check out his stuff, most of his good stuff. Opinion But Facts is the place to go. Like I said, I have 2 other channels. One that I do just experimental shit on, and one that I do my extraterrestrial and spiritual talks on, that I won't get too much into, like I said, on these shows, because I don't want to. Someday the 2 worlds will collide, but I don't want to dummy down this show, and I don't want to give any credence to a late night radio show like Coast to Coast AM that is nothing but a lot of Russian and Republican propaganda in 35 minutes of commercials or an hour with the same stale people all the time. Okay, like the people that host Ancient Aliens. I know a few of them, and they're bullshit artists. I'm not going to say who they are. It's not the host, though, with the big hair. Okay, I've only talked to him one time personally, Giorgio. Okay, we had a quick conversation one time, and that was it. The other couple, like David Wilcock, if you've heard of him. These guys are fucking bullshit artists. They make money writing books. If I had somebody to sit down and write a book with me and hear my story, it'd blow their fucking brain. This is what happened to me in 2011, and it's happened since up there in Oregon. Okay, so there's an interview out there where I tell it all on one of my channels. But if you're ever interested in hearing that, just let me know. I'm not going to ram that down anybody's throat. But again, I'd like to thank CEO Kenny Jackson of Opinion That Backs Entertainment. And with that, I'm going to wish everybody a big cosmic dating game kiss, even though nobody remembers the dating game unless they're older than me. And with that, much love, peeps, and that's a wrap.